So our next presentation will be given by David Cousins, and he'll be talking about surveillance.
I'm David Cousins. I'm Senior Biosecurity Officer from DPIRD and I'm based in South Perth. I've been involved with the surveillance activities that we've been doing to date across the state. I'm going to start today by discussing the trapping program that we have had in place, what the traps look like and how you can deploy some should you choose to do so, as well as a quick description on field surveillance and how to go about that activity for fall armyworm. As you can see here in this image, there's quite a number of components of the trap that are required to be put together. It's fairly straightforward. Most of them either clip or push together quite quickly. In the bottom image, we have partly completed trap with the lure. The lure comes in a silver package that when not in use, if you've got a number of them, should be kept in cool, dark place, preferably the fridge or freezer. But when you're ready to go, please undo the pack and place them straight into that white cage that you can see. And then we pop that white cage straight into the top of the lid. There's nothing more need to do. You do not need to pierce the plastic packaging that the blue gel is in. It will permeate through the plastic quite fine. In the bottom of your trap, you will need to have a yellow pest strip. This is to kill the moth so it's not flapping around in the base of your trap. When it does that, it knocks about, knocking off the scales, which are often an identifying feature for the taxonomists when they're looking at it. And also the moth is not going to be constantly being distressed while in the trap, with the potential of it getting out as well. The pest strip is, as I indicated, got an insecticide in it. It is harmful, so we need to be using gloves or forceps or pliers to handle the product. Please don't touch it by hand and put that straight into the bottom of your trap. When using a trap, it is always helpful to identify which trap you have a sample from, and especially if you're sending it in for an identification to the department or even to someone else that might have expertise in the identification of these moths. So we've used, as you can see in the bottom image there, a barcode that we put on it, and that can be scanned when using My Pest Guide, which is a very useful tool and something that I highly recommend people consider using to keep a track of not only where the traps are located, what they catch, but also the sample numbers that might be associated with a catch that they have that is sent in for identification. South Perth Department will definitely be using that sample number and will reply with an identification associated with the sample number. So that'll be easy for you to keep a hold or a track of those samples that are submitted. They're pretty easy to deploy once they are put out into the field. You have a wire that you can hang them in a tree if it's a horticultural location that you're placing them in, like a tree crop. But you can also deploy them in a broadacre or a field crop, hanging it off a fence, off a pole, or some such location which is relatively unobscured. There's some information at the bottom of this slide there as to how to prepare a sample and how to send it in. I strongly suggest that you pack out a sample when you put it in a container, that, as I mentioned, you're not having the sample banging around in the container, just the same reason why you won't want the moth flying around live in your trap. As it does, it'll bump and knock off those scales and it'll become a very nondescript, very browny grey moth for the taxonomist or expert to have a look at. If it is slightly damp, placing a piece of tissue paper in also help prevent the sample going off, being mouldy or the likes. There's some information right at the bottom as how to send it in if you're wishing to send it into the department, making an attention to myself or whoever you are currently liaising with at the department would be preferred option, and we can process that through our labs here for an ID. Just want to touch quickly on the permit. There is a permit that's applicable to the pheromone and lure, the pest strip that is associated with the trap. So currently, as you can see on the AVPMA website, there is a permit for the use of this trap and pest strip that is held by the Department of Water and Agriculture, Water and Environment, which is a federal government agency. And it is the state and Commonwealth biosecurity arms of each agency that are able to handle and train others in the handling of this product. So should you wish to have a trap at this stage, it is best to liaise with your local Department of Agricultural office and determine how you can get a hand of the trap and how to be trained in the deployment of the trap. For more information, please visit the AVPMA website and quote that pheromone permit number that you see at the top of this screen to find out more information. So as I mentioned, trap sites can be located in a tree crop. It can be located in a space that is out in the open, such as a pasture crop or in a field crop itself. When you're placing it out, please make sure that you've got easy access to it, that it is out of the way. Having said that, it's often not a good idea to have it on the main road so that other people come and check it out and see what's going on and poke around. Have it away from sheds, away from houses, away from light sources essentially, as this will confuse and have an interaction with the moth and the light and the pheromone, potentially distracting the likely trapping of the moth that you're targeting there. Don't put it down an interrow in a crop. Keep it on that border of a crop or on a main access drive between some fields or paddocks. That would be a preference. And that way your pheromone will have its best chance of getting out across the environment and attracting the moths that are in the area, and therefore the moths finding their way back to your trap. As you can see here in this bottom image, we've got a trap that's been placed on a post and hung off the wire. Perfect, use whatever is available and close at hand. Doesn't have to be fancy or anything new. And having your trap basically 20 to 70 centimetres above the top of the plant that's growing. If it is an annual crop, that's quite common and quite easy to achieve, except for corn, I guess, when it gets more closer to maturity. When you're looking at a horticultural tree crop, for example, you're not going to be able to have that. So having it at about 1.5 metres above the ground will assist in achieving your best outcome with that. And deploy it, as we mentioned, at an easily accessible location along a track is always a good option for you, should you do that. And if you have more than one trap on one site, please keep it at least 50 metres away. I'd highly recommend you pushing it out to 100 metres. And then again, you're not having an interaction between the pheromone on two traps and moths potentially getting confused as to where the lure is coming from. So I've already touched a bit on sampling and the handling of samples. Pack it well, make it sure it's secure. Use pen sparingly, use pencil as a preference, particularly, as I mentioned, if the sample is damp, then label that you put on the sample won't run or be unable to be read. If you're using My Pest Guide, I can strongly recommend you do that. Barcodes are easily read with that device. You can also create your own sample ID or trap ID by simply typing that in there, or there's a function of pressing a button for it to randomly generate a sample ID. So use that, have your date that you're collecting the insect very clear and sending that down along with your name for us to get back to you with that ID on your sample. Package them well, keep them dry and safe, and get them down to us as soon as possible, and we'll get you an ID. So field surveillance is something that you're already doing and something that I don't need to explain, but please get into that field surveillance activity as early as you can. Get in there when the crop is small, rather than waiting until you go halfway, 3/4 of the way through your crop and start seeing damage extensively. Look at the underside of leaves for egg masses and newly hatched larvae. Your young larvae will be causing the windowing damaging, and the older larvae will be getting into a more mature plant, more likely when the whorl is more well developed in the case of corn and sorghum, and you'll be starting to see that pattern of shot holing occur in the leaf. So here in the top left-hand corner, you've got some young first instar larvae that have just hatched. As you can see, they're quite small and have been described earlier in other presentations. The windowing damage that we're talking about is there in the bottom left, and that will be the sort of damage that will be caused by those young instars. In the top right, you've got a larger larvae with that shot holing damage, and in the bottom right corner, you've got an egg mass there right next to some old shot holing damage that had been caused by a previous generation. So depending on what top stage of the crop that you're looking at as to what damage you may be finding in the crop, but also what life stage that you might be finding. You could well be finding more than one species of caterpillar in your crop. It's going to be ones that you've been dealing with for year on year. The other Spodoptera that you've no doubt come across, northern armyworm if you're in the north, southern armyworm if you're elsewhere, budworm and helicoverpa. So current trap locations as indicated here on the map are at the Pilbara, the Kimberley, the Midwest and in Perth. So we've got traps in Kununurra, as you can see there, in Broome, in Carnarvon, Geraldton and Perth. There are traps that are in the process of going out in the Pilbara as well through our Karratha office. So this map will get updated and there will be one no doubt available on our website in the near future. I think you've got fall armyworm. What do you do? We've mentioned My Pest Guide Reporter a number of times. You can go onto your app store and find that app. You can also go onto the department's website or Google My Pest Guide Reporter and get a hold of it that way. You can report through Pest and Disease Information Service, which is our frontline pest and disease information contact point for the department, which is either by phone or by email. You can contact your local DPIRD office and speak with someone there, or you can consult your local agronomist and have a chat with them and find out more information about fall armyworm. Thank you for your time today, and I hope that has been of some help.
Okay, thank you, Dave. I think we'll move on to the next presentation.